Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Tessa Owens. I am relatively new to the university. I've been here for 5 months now, and I'm working in the ILT. I have a background in learning and teaching both in the UK and in New Zealand. And I haven't been involved in assessing any teaching portfolios here at the University of Auckland, but have got experience in both the UK and New Zealand. And so I'm using that background, understanding what's needed in a teaching portfolio here today. But others in the audience have far more experience of the process here at the university. So if there's questions that are specifically about process and so on, I'm relying on them to help us out. Okay, so I just want to start by acknowledging help that I've received for this presentation, and you can see the people there who have helped. Andrew, who's sitting in the row there, Susan also have helped in the preparation of this, particularly looking at the University of Auckland system. And a few people have also shared their portfolios with me, which has been great because I can see what the university is using and how it's being assessed. So Jill, Nort, Peter, Kirsty and Angela have all provided their portfolios for me, and I've got some examples of what they've put in there, so I hope you'll find those particularly insightful. Okay, now I mentioned that I've got hyperlinks throughout the PowerPoint, so if you do want a copy of the PowerPoint, just let me know and I can send it on to you. The process that's used here at the university for promotions, continuation, teaching excellence, is that you need an application form. So I've put there the application form for promotion, and that's divided. There are two separate applications, one for professional teaching fellows and one for research fellows, and right the way through to professor, you see there. There's a separate application form for continuation, and there are various teaching excellence awards. There are national teaching excellence awards, which I'm sure you're aware of, but also the university has its own teaching excellence awards. And very often you're asked to provide a teaching portfolio to address the criteria for each of those processes. So you need the application form and you need your teaching portfolio, and the two go in tandem to prove your case that you have either met the standard or you are working at a level which is above the standard. So if you're a lecturer and you want to apply for senior lecturer, you need to be able to show that you're able to operate at the higher level. And it's an annual process, as you probably know. So there are two main purposes for teaching portfolios. The first is institutional, and really this is to provide a verifiable work record. It proves that you've done what you should have been doing. It also satisfies kind of society's demands for accountability, you know, that we're not all just sitting here in our ivory tower and, you know, doing very little, that, you know, we are accountable for the work that we need to do. And it also helps confer awards and so on. So if you believe that you're an excellent teacher, and if you've been, it's been suggested that you put in for, say, a national or local teaching excellence award, then you provide a portfolio in order to prove the case. But it's also used for your own personal development. It's not just an institutional sort of managerial thing, it's also used for your own personal development. And by keeping a teaching portfolio, it should help provide insight into your own practice. What are you doing? Why are you doing it that way? What happens when you do it that way? And how might you adjust your practice in order to improve? It also helps you in dialogue with others. So if you have a mentor, if you're fortunate enough to have a mentor, for example, or belong to any sort of community of practice who discuss learning and teaching, by keeping a teaching portfolio, it helps you to think about what it is that's going on in your practice. So this is a record of your regular development. And it's also an opportunity for you to show off and say, this is what I do in my learning and teaching, and this is how well it's gone. Okay. How portfolios are assessed, I've again hyperlinked the academic standards framework into that, and again that's divided between PTFs and lecturers. Referees are also required for a teaching portfolio, so you need to provide the name of somebody that the institution can turn to, who can verify that what you say you've done, you have done, and talk in glowing terms about you. Your application form and your portfolio go forward to a staffing committee, and it's a departmental staffing committee, and they assess your portfolio along with the form, and the head of department then makes a recommendation to the dean as to whether you can be continued, go for the promotion, go for whatever it is that you've particularly asked for. So the assessment is an important part of it, like we keep on saying to our students, to look at how things are assessed. You know, for us as teaching staff, thinking about how we're assessed is an important part too. So the academic standards framework provides you with that rubric, if you like, to help you know what's happening. Okay, but as with many things, you probably already have a good understanding of how things are assessed. And I've got some case studies for you here. So if you would like to pass those around. Okay, they go around. Okay, so these case studies are hypothetical examples of things that I've seen fairly similar things in my experience as an assessor, of people who are applying for promotion or continuation or whatever it is. So I just want you to start by looking at the first extract, which is the pink sheet at the front there for Dr. Pepper. And I want you to imagine that you're a member of the staffing committee who's received this application, and I want you to comment on the excerpts that you see in front of you. So just do the pink one for now. Okay, so you're a member of the staffing committee, you've received this. What do you think of it? What comments would you be making when you received this?
I'm happy to support your application. It's quite funny.
Yeah, why?
Usually you would not solicit students to give good feedback.
Good, yeah, and I'm sure the staffing committee sees a lot of this. I've seen a lot of this in other applications, you know, that people solicit, they say to their students, can you say something nice about me? Or their colleagues as well, you know. And so you get these kind of cherry-picked comments, you know, of people saying, oh, they're great. You know, and that might be 2 or 3 of the students, but the other 300 might think they're awful. So yeah, you shouldn't solicit them. Yeah, good. Yeah. What else would you say about this application?
Satisfaction scores are just kind of meet the standard, but there's nothing really to say they're excellent.
Yeah, good.
And it looks from the email that really Dr. Pepper is bribing his or her students by telling them what's going to happen in the exam.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so this particular lecturer thinks that their satisfaction rates are really good, at 72 to 78%. So their perception of what's good is questionable. And then the second point you made was that it suggests that the student's being bribed to to write something good. Yeah, and there are real life examples of stuff like that. So.
The other one is that the last sentence just demonstrates that my approach is the one correct one.
Yeah.
That's rather exclusive, singular in its orientation.
Yeah.
It doesn't really speak to teaching philosophy.
Yes, good. Yeah, good. I'm going to talk a bit more about teaching philosophy soon, so that will come up. Okay, anything else that's wrong with this?
How do you define if you're highly organized?
Yeah, so what's this? So, you know, reflection's a big part of this. What does that tell you about this person's reflection?
I mean, normally you would have someone saying you're organized or you're disorganized, then I go to not how fine I am.
Yeah, yeah. So they're just reflecting in isolation. You know, they're sitting in their room and thinking, yes, I really am that good. And, and you know, that's questionable really, isn't it? Yeah. All right, any other things you want to criticise Dr. Pepper for? Andrew?
The only evidence, if it is evidence, is from a student perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
No peer feedback.
Good, good. So you'd want a bit more. So you'd want some peer feedback as well, and perhaps a few other bits of evidence, not just what the student says. Great, yeah. Okay, so move on to Doctor Who then, who's on the blue sheet, and have a read of Doctor Who's, or the excerpts of Doctor Who's application. So again, you're on the staffing committee. What do you think of it? Okay, what's wrong with this one then?
I just find it weird that when your students are lazy, you give them more reading.
Yeah, not proving their case, are they, that this is a good teaching strategy, yeah. So maybe you could suggest some other things that Dr.
Maybe they're lazy because they don't find it interesting.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And the whole perception that it's the student's fault. You know, if they're not getting it, it's their fault, and the assumption that it is because they're lazy rather than some other things. Yeah, good one. Yeah, what else? What's wrong with this application?
Well, he says that his success came through hard work, so this is how he learned, so this is how my students are going to learn in exactly the same way.
Yeah, good, yeah. So if they only work hard, they'll be okay, and it's because they're feckless that they don't get it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What else? Yeah. Say again.
A general lack of evidence.
Yeah.
I mean, the statements provided,
Yeah,
we don't actually know what the record is for the annual results or
Yeah.
student evaluations.
yeah, yeah, good. So only have that person's word for it that they are that good. Lovely. What do you think of their reflection?
No, it's not reflection.
Yeah, why?
Chucking things in the folder.
Yeah. They're keeping data, but they're not actually doing anything with it, thinking about what that actually means. Yeah, lovely. Andrew? Oh, all right. Okay, fabulous. Okay, let's go on to number 3 then, on the yellow. So this is Dr. Watson's application. Again, you're on the staffing committee. What do you think of these excerpts?
Well, the evidence is up front, isn't it?
Yep. Yep. So there's a graph there. What do you think of the student satisfaction ratings you see in the middle year there? There was a dip.
There's a dip, but then he, Dr. Watson, says the students were not happy, so I suppose they said I did X, Y, Z, and then the next year you see 81%.
Yeah, yeah. So is that a good thing to do? To say that it's all gone wrong at some point? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, why? Why is it a good thing to do?
Because it shows you're committed.
You're committed, that you can change your practice as a result, and that you're thinking about it, that you are reflective. Yeah, good. Any other points you want to make on number 3? No. Okay, so those extracts show us that, and I have seen not dissimilar things in extracts where people are claiming teaching excellence, as an example. And you're looking for evidence, you're looking at a purpose of reflection, and yet people's own perception of what's excellent often comes out in a teaching portfolio by the things that they choose to include and the things that they say about themselves. So it's important that in putting together our portfolios, we're really aware of the things that are needed. So what I did, I boiled down the academic standards framework, which you saw hyperlinked earlier on, to a sort of a basic rubric, the things that are being looked for. And when you're putting together your own teaching portfolio, these are the things that I think need to be considered. So first of all, the good things. I think that the portfolio needs to offer evidence of practice, and it needs to be triangulated. One of the points Andrew made earlier was that we've only got the student's word for it in that first particular one. You need more than that. You need a few sources of evidence, and they should triangulate. So what one thing says, you should be able to see in another piece of evidence. So what the student says, what the peers say, what the student evaluations say, what your own personal reflections say. There should be a way to triangulate all the pieces of evidence. The portfolio should also be student-centred, so it's attuned to differences in student ability and approaches to learning and teaching. So Nadia was saying, you know, that particular example where the lecturer said, well, you know, if they don't get it, the lazy ones, I'll provide them with more reading. Well, if they don't get it, it might be because they've got too much reading that they can't cope with already. So maybe you provided some additional things like some videos that they could watch, or you might have had a session with them where you discussed particular problem areas or whatever it was, but other ways of doing it. That it demonstrates reflectiveness, that reflection as well isn't just, I collect all this data and here it is. It's I collect this data and this is what it tells me about my teaching and where I find problems. And we can all, even if very good teachers can find ways of improving, say what that is. It should convey that teaching is valued, that it's not just something that you have to do, you know, when you can't get on with your research. And it should be well written, clear, readable, and so on. And then not good, obviously, it's just the opposite of that. Portfolio contents, they need to start with a teaching philosophy. And teaching philosophies are often asked for now in many sorts of teaching portfolios. Particularly for national awards. So those of you who want to go for a national award will I think, you know, need to really box this one off. After the philosophy, it's followed by a narrative where you persuade the reader of your development as a teacher, but it has to fit with your philosophy. So if your philosophy is that students learn by finding out, by discovery, for example, then you'll have to then show in your practice how you have sessions where students find out and discover, and they don't have sessions where, you know, it's you talking at the front and them sort of sitting passively. And then you have to provide evidence to support this narrative. So the key words here that assessors are looking for is that it's authentic and persuasive, and also selective. Again, the teaching portfolios can have, you know, they can be huge, great tomes of, you know, what every student's ever said that was nice about me, or whatever colleague, you know, I've had who's said, you know, yeah, you're a really good teacher there, all those emails and everything that are all boxed in there. So the evidence does need to be selective. And so these things need to align. So your philosophy, your pedagogy and practice, and the proof need to be aligned. And I've got a quote there from Selden. So first reflect about your underlying philosophy of teaching, then describe the teaching strategies and methodologies that flow from that philosophy, why you do what you do in the classroom, and then select documents and materials which provide the hard evidence of one's teaching activities and their effectiveness. So you focus on what distinguishes you as a teacher. What is it about you that makes you a good teacher? And then you write your narrative with that. You can use theory, and some of the examples I'm going to show you in a minute do use theory. You don't have to, you know, if you don't know much education theory, you don't have to use that, but some people do. And you should use verbs which articulate your role. So if you're in a leadership position, then you should say that you're in a leadership position, but you might be coordinating. So whatever it is you do, you should use the correct verb. And if you look at the application forms, it will give you some steer on that. And then ensure that you provide evidence of your philosophy in action. So whatever that is, that you do it. But writing the philosophy of teaching is probably the hardest thing to do. And I'm going to show you some examples now. But a philosophy of teaching statement is a narrative that includes your conception of learning and teaching, so it says what you think learning and teaching is about. It's a description of how you teach, so what do you do when you're in the classroom. And it's a justification for why you teach that way. So it tends to embody all those three. Now, lots of people write it in lots of different ways. And the examples that I've got for you, you'll find on the green page, which is the last page in that handout. So I mentioned that Jill Nord and Angela, for example, were happy for us to look at their portfolios. And I've just extracted their teaching philosophies from their portfolios for you. So you'll see they're different. And there's a third one that I've added on at the end as well, which is from Ohio State University, is really different again. So you can see they're all different. But what I want you to do is read the three of them, and then in the box at the bottom, just write 5 words which you would choose to describe your teaching philosophy. And then we'll talk about what that is, because pinning this down is essential, I think, to getting a good portfolio together. Okay, so take a moment to read those. Okay, let's hear some of your examples of the sorts of words you're using and then how that is reflected in your practice. So who wants to share anything that they've got in their list? Go on, share it with us.
I was just saying that I like to think that teaching is not about telling our students how they might pass an exam or do well in an assignment, but also about what's the skill that you're learning that you can take on from there in
Right,
whatever you do in your life. So when I teach, I try to bring in examples of where and how they would use that knowledge
right.
in real world situations.
That's lovely. Yeah, yeah. That's lovely. So it's your philosophy with your practice. Lovely. Yeah, yeah. All right. Other examples? What do you guys have?
Well, we have different words for quite similar ideas. We talked about finding a balance between being compassionate and also having some accountability. And so that seemed to be important for all three of us.
Right. Okay. So how does your compassion feed into your practice?
So, for example, I tend to run a lot of extra office hours leading up to exams and tests and things like that. And I kind of have an open door policy if students turn up.
Right.
But if they turn up and, as some of them do, they say, I didn't come to any of these classes, can you just summarize it for me? I tend not to look on that very compassionately. And I tend to send them away with the page numbers and say, come back to me once you've read it.
Right. Right. Lovely. Yeah. Other things? Other examples? Any more examples? Words you're using and how it shows in your practice? Yeah.
Flexible, yes, adapting also to new needs of students. Like, say, a lot of them are starting to work
Yeah.
while they're at the university, so giving them options if they can't attend
Right.
and watch videos or somehow still participate in class with their
Right.
technologies that allow them to still contribute to class while they're not even on campus.
Lovely. Lovely. So you're a flexible individual and this is how it shows in your practice. Nice one. Yeah. Any others? Yeah.
I went beyond the classroom and applied a little bit to some of the other comments, and that involves bringing in some of the research. So if presenting to a group of lawyers at a telecom, then to bring in some of their insights and questions around governance or leadership
Lovely.
and say this is how it plays out
Right, lovely. So some real world examples, and going back to your point about skill development, them understanding a real business context as opposed to a theoretical one. Lovely. All right. Any other examples, Nadia?
Talk about
Yeah.
I think that's quite personal because so I come from Mauritius, small island, not many opportunities, but I find that through education I managed to escape a lot of limiting circumstances. So I want to do that for other people as well. So through education you can come out in whatever circumstances you succeed. So
Yes.
That's my
Yeah, lovely. So philosophies tend to be that personal. They're about you, who you are, and why you're doing the job that you're doing. Why do you care about the craft of teaching? Why are you trying to be a better teacher? And that's very often comes from your background, your experiences and so on. But it's proving that point, but it's also owning the idea of having a teaching philosophy. And it's not just something that you have to do, as I say, when you're not doing your research, that there's a driver there for you as an individual. Those of you who haven't written a teaching philosophy before will find this at this hyperlink. So this is obviously Ohio State University, and that's where I got that James Collier philosophy from. You'll see it on this particular page, but some really lovely examples of lots of different sorts of lecturers and so on who are writing their philosophy of teaching. And again, you'll see, just like Jill Nort's and Angela's and James's here, are all really different. There isn't a right way to write it, but you know, it gives you some various insights. But it can feel terribly personal, and it's, you know, sometimes it feels quite a sensitive thing to do. Yeah. Yeah, don't copy them. Yeah, that's not allowed, copying. Okay, so it's that fitting together. So once you've got your philosophy, it needs to show then in your practice and your evidence and have that triangulation. On this slide, I'm just showing various forms of evidence that you can use, because there's all different sorts of evidence that you can use in order to support your claim for excellence or competence or whatever it is you're claiming. But you'll see at the top there's formative evaluation. So that's what you're doing when you're just talking to your peers and talking to your students, and there's no sort of formal, way of measuring things really, but it's just being in touch with how things are going. And then on the bottom part of that model, we move to summative evaluation. So that's far more about things like auditing processes and so on that go on within the university and external to the university about how things are going. But they're all attempting to measure teaching performance, learners' performance and so on. So there's various sources of evidence. So those of you who are struggling to think what might I also bring into my portfolio to help me prove the case that I am doing well, then you could have a look at some of these things, like progression, retention and completion rates and so on, benchmarking your class performance against other similar classes here at the university, or maybe nationally if it's a particularly unusual course. So there's various sources of evidence that you can use to prove your case. Peer observation is one of them, and I'm going to distinguish here between peer observation, which is what you do with your peers, and it's informal, and peer review, which is different. Peer review here at the university we're using to describe a formal process which you need to go through if you're looking for continuation or promotion. And it's run by the ILT, and there are various people who are assessors who'll come and watch a class and write a report on what's happened. But peer observation is a normal process that will happen in most institutions, and it's formative. It's a way for you to work with one of your peers and say, come and watch my teaching. Tell me what you think about it, and then you have a discussion afterwards. But the last point that's on that particular slide, that's based on the assumption that the teacher and observer will learn more about teaching from the observation, is a true one. It's supposed to be an equal learning opportunity. So I might go and watch Andrew's class, for example, And I would learn as much from that process, being the observer, as I'd hoped to share with Andrew about what I thought about what went on in the classroom, because it's an opportunity for us to discuss teaching and how it went. And, you know, that I have those problems as well, and then we talk about how we dealt with them and so on. So that's peer observation. Peer review is the formal process which I mentioned, and there's various parts to the process that you see from pre-observation right through to the final report, which is signed off, and then that can be used for continuation and promotion. But in a good teaching portfolio, I think you typically expect to see both. You'd expect to see peer observation where you're talking with your peers, where it's, you know, it's a real life, it's important to you to understand how things are going and conversations that you had. The formal process is required for a teaching portfolio, but as I say, you'd expect to see both. Lots of portfolios claim student evaluation as one of their pieces of evidence, and I've taken this from Angela's portfolio, and you can see what she's done there. She's got all the years that she's been teaching, she's got every course that she taught, she's got her enrolment, so you know she's got classes of over 200 there down to smaller classes with 20 odd students in. She's got her respondents there. You know, so how many of her students responded to the evaluation? And I'm sure you've seen examples of this. I've heard lecturers who will say, oh, you know, 80% of students said it was great. And then you say, well, what was the actual number of the students? And then you find out it was 20. You know, this is from a class of, you know, 400 or something like that. So it's not, you know, as soon as you see the actual number, it becomes more real. And then she's, you know, shown on against each of the student evaluation criteria what her success is. And, you know, that's hugely impressive, isn't it? You know, sort of up in the 90s for just about everything. And I don't think everybody would be able to claim that level of you know, expertise. But it's a good way of really nailing it, isn't it? Saying, this is what the students think, and this is what they've thought across the years, and this is what they've thought in all of my courses, whether they're big or small. So this is really convincing piece of evidence. Think about your referees as well, and I mentioned that Peter Smith shared his portfolio with me, and there were some lovely things in that. And just look at that final sentence there, where his referee says he has a passion for effective student-centred stimulating learning, and that zeal has galvanised many of us to work at our own teaching development. So depending on the role that you're trying to be promoted into, that last sentence would be a good sentence that you would use for an associate professor or a professor application, because it shows not only is he a good teacher, but also he's, in a sense, mentoring, persuading, encouraging other teachers to think about how they teach. So it's a particularly persuasive piece of evidence there. Okay, so last couple of slides. Just in planning your teaching portfolio, you know, prepare early. So this is just an evaluation cycle. So start early, you know, keep talking about it, keep thinking about it, keep saying to your students, so how's it going, and getting feedback from them. But then feeding back to them and either saying, look, I'm going to have to manage your expectations here. This is how it's going to be, and explaining them to why that is. Or saying, right, well, you didn't like that, and I am able to change things a little bit, so I will. So keeping that feedback loop going. When you're planning your teaching portfolios, the advice is to evaluate early. So formative always trumps summative, that you've done something about it. You haven't just evaluated at the very end and said, well, it was mediocre. Do it variously, so get student evaluations, get self-evaluations, get some other method of evaluation in order to prove the case. And do it in public, so, you know, talk about it amongst your peers, talk about it with your head of department, get advice, change things, you know, make it an active process. So the summary really is to make a plan, to get ready early. And to keep records. I was talking to Andrew about this last week, and he was telling me about an APR folder that he has on his desktop. So, you know, as things come in on a regular basis, just move a copy of it into your folder that's about your APR, which can also, of course, feed into your teaching portfolio. Because otherwise you get to at the end of a 12-month period and you think, well, what have I done? And then you can't remember half the things that were good. So I think the folder idea is a really good one. Remember to provide evidence, and there's all the various parts of evidence that you can do. Attendance at workshops, of course, is also one of the things that you can use to prove your interest in learning and teaching. But just attending wouldn't be sufficient. You'd also need to say, I went to that, and as a result, I then did this in my teaching, and that helped. And obviously student evaluation. And that last hyperlink there is advice from CLEAR, who have pages and pages and pages of stuff on teaching portfolios. So if you want any of that, then that link will take you to it. Okay, so that's my last slide. We've got 10 minutes, so an opportunity for you to ask questions, which I may not be able to answer, as I said, if it's specifically process related, but Andrew, Susan are in the room, so I'm sure we'll be okay. So, any questions?
So is there a page limit?
Page limit.
Can you just...
If what you're doing, if you're looking for promotion, they give you little boxes that you have to fill in for each standard, and there's got a 500-word limit. But you can add in your teaching portfolio at the end, and that has no page limit. Having said that, longer is not always better. Right, Olga? Olga's on the committee as well. We see some that are, it's got every single comment anyone has ever said about them anywhere. And those are often the ones that don't really know what they're doing, in my opinion. So they're trying to provide you with like the shotgun.
Yeah.
And if you're applying for awards, they've got fairly strict criteria as well about what to provide and how much, what's allowed. And promotion as well. It explicitly says in the rule that solicited feedback is not accepted, and feedback from your peers, unless it's been in the sort of, you're showing it's a developmental thing. You can't solicit an email from your peers saying, I think you'll be a great professor, kind of thing.
Yeah.
People put it in anyway. We tend to ignore it.
We talked about this last week, and it is the case for national teaching awards that you wouldn't necessarily solicit it, but you'd certainly include, I think, peer feedback on your teaching. If you wanted to, because it shows your influence as a teacher on other teachers, and I think that's an important part of.
It's about knowing what the rules are for what you're applying for. So promotion is against rules. For excellence awards, well, that's evidence really that you've got some form of esteem.
Yes. Yeah. 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 No.
In Canvas, there's this e-portfolio section. And I said, oh, I wonder if people can do their teaching portfolios in Canvas. So if you're teaching, if you've got a really good exercise or a really good, something that is brilliant, and it seems like you can tow it along, and it looks to me like you can use it only in the way Andrew's got that folder in his inbox where he tows relevant stuff. You'd still have to practice possibly outside, but it does look like it's, everything's going to be there in Canvas like you're teaching, so it does look handy.
Yes.
Consider that as a kind of repository to gather your stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I think for the electronic portfolios where you expect the assessor to look at an electronic portfolio, they may get a bit lost really, because this can be so much information in a portfolio unless you index it really well. So, and I can't see any committee being prepared to start looking at other stuff outside of an application.
You said they look at electronic portfolios, but then they wanted the applications photocopied, so there we were.
Okay, Any other comments, questions, horror stories from the staffing committee that you can share?
With the exercises, one thing that I also thought was missing, but you mentioned at the time, is context about the courses.
Mm-hmm.
Certain courses are easier to get good evaluations on than others, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know, say a very large course or a very small course, you know,
Yeah.
there's different levels, I think.
Yeah.
And also with Angela's one, I liked how she put in the response rate.
Yeah.
But again, in our context, we've got paper versus online. Online, we're used to abysmal response rates, and we tend to forgive that kind of response rate.
Right.
We know it's paper and you're getting that response rate. We're thinking, ooh, you've got hardly anyone coming to class. But the ones who are coming like you, you've got the ones who aren't. What's happening there?
Yeah. So is that generally understood in the staffing committee that, you know, that's the case with electronic submissions of evaluations? That
Electronics fairly rubbish there.
right. Okay.
In terms of response rate.
Right.
You know, I mean, like, look at Angela's one from 2011. You've got 11 responses
Yeah.
out of 126.
Yeah.
And if I look at my evals personally, I've done them online, it's been hardly anyone responds. And I've done them on paper, you get most people.
Yeah.
But again, that's a thing we can change, I guess. But,
I'm encouraging folks to do their evaluations in class with people on phones and as that works. The trouble with doing it on paper is only all the people who thought your course was rubbish aren't there.
Mm.
Well, that's an advantage.
that's an
also.
advantage. Because don't forget, we use these things in a way they're not really supposed to be used, which is to evaluate performance rather than improve teaching. You know,
Well,
you,
yes,
we
this
can have
is
that
just one
argument,
snip
but
of
yeah, it's one
evaluations,
little
but
thing,
yeah.
but it is evidence that is very, very strongly looked at by the staffing committee because it's the main one that we have in this institution.
Yeah.
So you need to be quite strategic about the numbers.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Just one last point. On, you know, when you're completing your portfolio, I think it's really good advice to just ask somebody to look at it for you, you know, look at your draft so that they can give you a bit of feedback on what it's looking like. I know a number of colleagues who got advice recently, you know, because all of the applications went in and they said it really, really helped them. So if you know anybody on the staffing committee or just an experienced peer, you know, just ask them to have a quick look over it, and I think that will help. Okay, I probably need to pull stumps at this occasion, so thank you very much. Thanks for coming.